So we've been working on this mantua at Barrington Hall now for a couple of months. One of the things we've been trying to do is very gently with the fabric re-piece back together the pleating, the ways that the fabric would have sat. So we've just been working on the petticoat today. But even with the obvious markings of where stuff has been, one of the issues is not everything's obvious, not everything has got an obvious answer. And even though through the research we're able to compare it to a lot of there's maybe a good 5-6 mantuas out there that are very similar in style, very similar date, two are very similar exquisite gold fabrics. But there's so many variations and you've got so many different methods of sewing that it's hard to find a definite way that each mantua would have been sewn. So for one of the big issues we've got today is that the petticoat has a curved front. It's only a very slight gradual curve, but it's distinct enough to have been a purpose for it. So what was the purpose for it? There is another gown in the Bath Museum that's got a very deep cut out centre front petticoat, and sort of playing with the idea that was the centre front of the gown tab then mounted onto that to really hold in the shape. But this is maybe a little bit too wide for that, and more playing around with the fact that when this petticoat was put on and the ribbons, the ribbon that was mounted on the inside of it to tie it to the waist, they're not really pulling it in. It's almost like it's made to sit and fit perfectly, because the more you pull it in, the more you're going to be stretching and warping this front curve. So that's kind of one of the issues of how did they treat it? Did they mount it onto ribbon? How did they tie it round? The other issue that we've really got a lot of questions about is this section of the top of the hoop. So there's quite a few mantuas out there that have a sort of a furbelow trim that's mounted on around the top, and this is actually a pocket, and then it's got sort of gold braidings on it or various trims. We can't really see any evidence of particularly wide trims in the silk, and even though some of the stitch holes have clearly disappeared, because there's areas where we know that has been stitched but they've disappeared, so it could be that some of the stitching holes have disappeared, but it's just we don't know, so therefore we can't make a decision on it, and we don't have the pieces, there's no trim piece left. So it's kind of playing around with how do we do this, because there's enough variations of methods out there in the other mantua and the other mantuas to not really be able to give us enough to make a firm decision. So one of the ideas we're playing at the moment is actually just once we've sewn these pleats down and in the positioning where they're meant to be sitting as original, and then maybe mounted on something just to give it support, so that we're not making a decision on it, but we're making it hold its shape, sit on the hoop. But that's one of the things we're playing with, and as we progress down this, as we start saying it together, it might be that we find other stuff that gives us a clearer idea. But that's one of the mysteries that we're having to deal with at the moment.